Welcome to Uncle Stu, the old man on the block. Appreciate you coming here. Tell us about yourself, sir.
Absolutely. So my name is Brandon Jones. I am an executive director of a nonprofit organization in Minnesota called Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health. I've been a mental health clinician since 2013. I don't practice clinically anymore because I've been focusing more on being an executive and a manager and a leader. But all the work that I do is still therapeutic in one way or another. Born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota, grew up in a household full of trauma and drama. And what I mean by that is, family one time is more than enough, and I've seen way more than one time. And I grew up in that type of dynamic pretty much until I was about 12 years old. That's when my life kind of took an interesting turn, where my grandmother let out a family secret that she wasn't supposed to let out, and told me that the person who I thought was my dad wasn't my dad. He was actually my stepfather, who was also the abuser in my home. So she tells me this a few weeks before my 12th birthday. I'm born on the 4th of July. And then she also tells me, you're going to meet your dad on your birthday and I'm going to take you to go see him. And that caused a huge rift between my mom and my grandma, which really it opened up old wounds that I wasn't aware were there. I always thought that they were pretty tight and pretty cool. But what I found out as I got older was their relationship was rocky because my mom got pregnant with me when she was a senior in high school, and my grandma was not happy about that at all. So they had a contentious relationship because she got pregnant with me. That opened up a whole new perspective for me as a young man, because now I'm seeing my grandma, my mom fight. They argue and have issues with one another. And then also this man that I thought was my dad, who always treated me differently than my two younger brothers, his actual biological children. I was in this whirlwind and I was turning 12. As a black man turning 12, what starts happening at 12 years old? Get a little hair under your armpits, get a little hair in your private area. You start thinking of all these things that you are a man, and that's what happened with me. And I remember I went to go visit my dad on my birthday, 4th of July, barbecue, everything's all good. Kids are outside playing. My dad is from North Minneapolis. That's where most of the black folks are here in the Twin Cities. So I go over, I'm a St. Paul kid, so I go over to the other side of the town. I get to meet all my family members. I find out I have all these other siblings that I didn't know about at the time. And my dad wasn't there. He didn't show up till late. And this is before cell phones. So my grandma dropped me off and said, I'm going to pick you up when the street lights came on. And sure enough, the street lights came on was the drunk dude who showed up late to meet his son. And then my grandma picking me up. So we had a very short exchange. I think he gave me his phone number, and then I didn't see him again until the Rough Riders Cash Money concert that took place about a year later. I don't know. Now, being 13 years old, I probably shouldn't have been at that concert, but that was a life-changing event in itself too. But right. I ran into my dad. I went to the bathroom and I ran into my father at this concert. That was the next time I seen my dad, was at this concert, and and he was like, "Son," and I'm confused. I'm like, I don't know if I should call him dad. I dapped him up and I just kind of moseyed on back to my seat because I didn't know what to do at that time. And I share both of those experiences because those were significant. Because in my mind, what happened over that time was I started to decide that I cannot depend on men, more specifically black men. I can't trust them. And that's a very dangerous mindset that many black kids, males and females, develop very young when they're let down by that fatherlessness, and sometimes even the incompetencies of their mothers as well. And I remember harboring that anger, and I was able to channel that anger through football. I was a pretty good football player, was recruited very young, things of that nature. That was an acceptable outlet for me to display my frustrations, and I took full advantage of that as a young man. And playing football actually helped me get to college. I went to the University of Minnesota. Actually chose not to play football. I was able to go on an academic scholarship because I was actually a little nerd who was just pissed off and could play football good. So most people didn't know I was smart because I would hide that. I had IB classes, AP classes. I'm on the top level of my high school with all the white kids and the Asian kids, and most people didn't know because I would tell jokes in the hallway, and the next thing you know, I'm disappearing because I got to go fly up the stairs to get to class. And so my academics were always good, man. I was almost a straight A student until all the way through senior year. Went to the University of Minnesota and originally went to school to be a dentist, believe it or not. But I found out very quickly that, my public high school math and science classes were very different than a top research university, University of Minnesota. And academically, I got my butt kicked and I got put on academic probation. Since I was on scholarship, I had kind of like a special counselor. And this lady, she was a Black woman to this day. I love her to death. Her name is Crystal. Crystal was so important. She was the only person to really keep it real with, because everybody else thought I was already successful. You know, being a kid from the hood, you make it to college, everybody think that you on, and it's not like that. But everybody was already championing me because they were like, well, Brandon figured it out. He was able to make it. But that was just the beginning, and most people didn't understand that. But Crystal did. Crystal understood it very clear. And I remember when she got word that I was on academic probation, she told me to meet with her. She said, you need to come see me right away. And I went to see her the next day. And I'll never forget this. I walked in her office. She said, shut that door behind you. I shut the door. She said, Brandon, yeah, I'm not disappointed in you. Don't be mad. But I'm going to tell you this because I love you. She was like, you better get your ass in gear, because it was hard to get you. She said it was hard to get you in this school, and it's going to be even harder to get you to graduate, let alone graduate on time. And she said, you smart enough to get this done. That's all I needed, man. That was the deal. When I left that office, I was determined to graduate on time, which I did, but I switched my major, which helped. So I went from pre-dentistry to sociology, because at the time, the only class I was passing was a sociology class called People and Problems, which in the Black community, we know a lot of people with a lot of problems, so that came very natural to me. And I remember just rocking and rolling in that class, and it was it just made a lot of sense. It was clicking. So I was like, let me switch my major to this. And that's kind of what kicked me off into working in mental health and things of that nature, was going there. So I did graduate on time. Took a year off, went to graduate school at another smaller school called Metro State University here in the Twin Cities. Got a master's in what's called community psychology. And then from there, I realized that I wanted to become a therapist. I figured that out halfway through that program, but realized that program didn't set you up to become a licensed mental health professional. So then I graduated, went right back to grad school like 2 months later, and got another master's degree in psychotherapy with the emphasis on marriage and family therapy. And I've been off to the races ever since in this world of mental health. So that's a little bit, that's my journey for the most part. Also, that's some more important information about myself is I'm married. I got 3 daughters, ages 9 to 1 years old. Yeah, man, I take a lot of pride in being a husband and a father. Those are two archetypes, two pillars in the community that I didn't get to see growing up. So I take a lot of pride in, making sure that I role model those behaviors any and everywhere that I go.
Let me ask you this. Let's go back a little bit. You spoke about your mother having you out of high school.
Yep.
And then you talked about having 2 brothers, different fathers.
Yep.
And immediately you went into hating Black males.
Yep.
That part.
Yep.
If you don't mind, go back.
Yep.
Help me with the understanding of the hating Black men, the hating Black male authority.
Yeah.
And then move me into how did you turn that around?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question.
Did you turn it around?
I have, but I'll be honest with you. It's a work in progress to this day.
Okay.
And here's why. And I understand this a lot better now at 36 years old than I did when I was, let's say, 25. Okay. And I remember always asking God, like, why did you put him in our life? Like, he's just terrorizing us. And I'm like 8, 9 years old saying these things, right? Questioning, why is this experience happening? Because he was just, this is before we started labeling people from the Middle East terrorists. He was a terrorist. He was to terrorize us when he was around. Now, my mom really functioned as a single mother because he was in and out a lot. And when he was in, he was just raising hell. So she was always the primary caretaker, the breadwinner and all that stuff. So like many Black males who were born in the 80s like myself, it's very easy to buy into the meme, the message of Negroes ain't nothing. I'll say it that way. Okay. But we all know what that is. I call it the Nas effect. It's like Negroes ain't nothing. So, and this is a mentality in the Black community. But in the Black community, this meme has spread even to other Black cultures, where Black men are seen as just not worthy, not nothing, and it's magnified even into today's society. But let's go back to, like I said, when I was 8, I remember hearing that. I grew up around a lot of women, aunties, cousins, aunties and cousins, mainly grandma, great grandma. And the only strong man in the family, if I had to be honest about it, not to disrespect any of my male family members, was my great grandfather. And once he passed, it was nobody else. It was nothing. And
Right.
all the women were always taking care of business. And
Mhm.
so for me, to have a stepfather who was very abusive, it was very easy for me to not trust black men, because all I seen was black men hurting, taking, causing pain and terror within the community, and that was either my stepfather, his cousins. They was all gang affiliated, gang related.
Mhm.
So I grew up around that lifestyle of being around Crips and things like that. And I was also raised to be, against black men. Especially playing football. That, again, football was very important in my life. It taught me leadership skills. It taught me how to channel my emotions, when to turn it off, when to turn it on. It taught me how to be tough and how to defend myself. But in those circles, you also are taught some toxic messages as well. Like, I remember being a peewee football player, not even the middle school or high school just yet, just peewee, and being told to put kids in the ambulance, and I did, and I was known for that. Every Saturday, the ambulance would come pick up a kid that I laid up, because that's how frustrated and angry I was, and that was encouraged. And I'm talking about 8-9 years old. I'm encouraged to like lay kids out and send them to the hospital. And that's dangerous. That's because some kids don't turn that off. And that's what we're seeing today with a lot of 13-year-olds who are, toting pistols with switches and extendo clips on there. They don't turn that aggression off. Luckily, I was able to do that. So that to harbor that anger towards black men was very easy for me, because it was pumped in the music. It was pumped in the community. It was what I heard all the women that I looked up to in my family. They would be saying the same thing. Even though I'm a young boy, they will still be telling me, Negroes ain't nothing. And don't be like this and don't be like that. So it's very easy to pick up on those messages and memes. And I kept that mentality. I never trusted black men. I didn't trust any of my coaches. I didn't trust. I've had one black teacher who's probably the person I trusted the most outside of my grandfather. And credit to him, he's still doing great work in community too. His name is Mitch McDonald. Shout out to Mitch. But outside of that, man, black men were not to be trusted at all. And that changed for me when I went to therapy, to be honest with you. I was 23 years old. It's before me and my wife got together. I said, that's when I determined that I wanted to become a therapist. And I remember going to therapy. I remember talking about just some of the things that have gone on in my life. And I had a white therapist. He's actually a Greek dude. And he was like, it sounds like you have problems with black men. He's like, tell me about that. He's like, do you hate yourself? Or what is it about black men? Because everything you stated has been negative about black men. And I never thought about it till he kind of put that mirror in my face and told me to talk about it. And then we spent several sessions really deconstructing what that meant. And I had to realize, like, man, my whole life I've been either trying to avoid black men or just ultimately just not wanting to associate with them. Always kept a small circle of friends, maybe one or two dudes would be my friends, and then everything else was females. I would keep a bunch of I was the guy who was cool with all the girls, and that was always I knew how to talk to women, so it was a very easy thing because I grew up with them. So going to therapy and breaking that down really helped me to start thinking about what was my issue with men. And then that's when I started to kind of direct my focus around therapy, is with working with men and breaking down some of the mentalities that we have and some of the emotional barriers that we have as men. So that's when the change started to happen. Now, before I start talking, I said it's a work in progress and I still deal with it till this day. And that's very true, because I do notice when I've counseled men, or when I'm a part of men groups and things like that, I still have it subconsciously in my mind, like, it ain't gonna go that far, or we don't organize very well. And I have these negative messages that are reinforced through various different things, but I have to keep pushing through those things to say we can be constructive, we can work together, and I can support other black men. So it is something that's there. It's like, it's a trauma. I've been traumatized by black men, and I have to learn how to cope with that trauma and figure out the best ways to move through it and not let it limit me.
Let me ask you a question. I hear this word trauma a lot.
Yeah.
And I know what it means because I've been to therapy. Give me the clinical definition of trauma. I hear it a lot. We tend to throw that word around a lot. So give me that understanding of trauma, that people who is hearing you really understand what that word means.
I'm gonna give you two definitions. I'm gonna give you the clinical definition, and then I'm gonna give you the definition that I work from. Okay.
Okay. Excellent.
All right. Clinical definition. You can Google this. You'll see something's in this ballpark because there's a lot of different definitions out there. But emotional and or psychological trauma is defined as an emotional response to a terrible event, like being in an accident, being raped, being in a national disaster. So it's a emotional response to dealing with something horrific that has taken place in your life. The way that I define trauma and the way that I've worked with my clients in the past, when I build programs, it's the definition that we work from, is a deep emotional wound. A deep emotional wound. And the reason for that is when you are dealing with folks who've gone through trauma for so long, sometimes that trauma becomes normalized.